Two, one.
Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. Dive deep into humane leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Don't miss our weekly YouTube live sessions every Thursday at 8:10 a.m. and 10:10 a.m. Eastern Time when we engage in tackling pressing leadership topics. Listen to all our podcasts on major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of humane leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm Chris Olerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, alongside Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader. Today, we will discuss how to answer an interview question about your style of leadership when humane leadership is not the only answer. Good morning, Roberto.
Good morning, sir. Have you been?
Been very good. I hope you're doing well.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much.
And I hope you don't need to be answering interview questions. I hope you're happy in your job right now. But, sometimes we have, I don't want to say we have to be inhumane leaders, but as our previous podcast, there are times when humane leadership may not be the number one thing that you'll do. And so in an interview, they're going to ask you about leadership style, very frequently a hot topic in the interview process if you're going to be leading people or leading projects. And there's textbook style of leaderships, and we talk about humane leadership, but sometimes that's not the best answer. So what are you thinking around when someone asks you what's your leadership style, but for the situation maybe humane leadership shouldn't be the first thing you answer with?
Well, first of all, let me answer that I'm really, really, really happy at my job right now. So I am
Good.
looking for a job. I'm being valuable, recognized, and I have a lot of challenges that I overcome. So that's why I'm happy.
Good.
And regarding your question is, um, when I used to be in interviews, someone asked me about my leadership style. I answered that my leadership style was situational, based on the people, on the project, on the problem of many different factors. This is because you cannot be straight with one line. You have to understand what is the situation, what are the problems, and decide what is the best style of leadership. So, for instance, maybe there is a problem with one of the reports that slacks a lot. So maybe that kind of leadership style has to be micromanagement. Maybe because that people or that person is looking at that, or maybe the project that we have to deliver in 2 days' time is 25% behind schedule. So instead of being a democratic leader, I had to do something to be very, very of the situation and push the team forward to reach the objective. So I think in the end, it depends on the situation.
Absolutely. And I think, you and I both come from an IT background. And while there's many different fields in IT, I always like to explain it. It's almost like being in the medical field. You're a doctor. Well, there's a big difference between a dentist and a brain surgeon versus a proctologist, right? So big opposite ends of the spectrum, shall we say, in terms of the type of career and what you need to know. And in IT, it's the same thing. Well, as in leadership, it's even more diverse. So not only is there maybe situational things where, like you said, sometimes you may have to be more demanding, and being a humane leader is not your number one priority in that situation. A lot of our listeners may not even be in IT, and the leadership style that they're using needs to be appropriate to that type of role. So, and I'll go way off the deep end on this one. Like in the military, if your leadership is you're the drill sergeant at boot camp, I don't think being a humane leader is your number one right answer for that interview, right? Your answer should be more about how you're driving people and getting them to achieve goals and motivating them to go above and beyond what they think they can physically do. Much different job than the way a humane leader might approach it, right? The humane leader's thinking really long term. I got a team that I need to collaborate, and I need everybody to love each other and be together and work on this project for multiple years and so on. Versus, you know, in that kind of short term goal, which is what your example was like, you know, just like a drill sergeant, you got them for 6 weeks and you got to get them into great shape. So, you know, humane leadership probably is not your go-to tool in those situations. So every job and every situation, situational, I think, is probably the best answer in the interview, and give 2 to 3 examples where different styles of leadership that you've used in your career were appropriate. So, hey, I've joined the team. I've been in the team for X number of years. We're doing long-term things. I would absolutely be, my number one answer is humane leadership, because I need these people to perform. We're in a culture in the company where most of the employees stay 10, 15, 20 years. You need to be a very humane leader. You're in a different company where the culture is turnover, turnover, turnover. Maybe it's the thing I could relate to maybe is a call center, right? And those employees, the longest person that's been there has been there 1 year. The average employee 10 years, 9 to 10 weeks, and they turn over. Yeah, you should use some humane leadership techniques there, but what you're more likely inclined to be is much more autocratic, much more strict about what each employee has to do. You're going to spell it out exactly the way they need to do it. They've got a script they need to follow. Humane leadership just shouldn't be your number one go-to. But in the interview, right, I'm probably going to bring it up that part of what I'm doing is coaching, right, very humane style of getting people to do the script correctly on the call center. So I think, you know, in interviews, you need to be able to be very flexible, still champion being a humane leader, but realize that if that's your go-to answer is the number one thing, depending on the role, it may not be the right answer.
Yeah, indeed. And one thing is that when we have a preferred leadership style, maybe we don't know how to apply other kind of leadership styles. So if we don't know how to apply them, we require to learn about it. Let's say, for instance, YouTube is a vast, wide knowledge database. So if you don't know how to be autocratic, democratic, other kind of leadership styles, type in YouTube and begin learning about it. So you can apply it when the time arises, when the moment arises, basically. So don't try to invent or to create something that maybe it isn't that leadership style. You require to know, and people will begin. Someone maybe in our audience hasn't printed this kind of leadership style. But if you learn and begin doing when the moment arises, it will go flowing.
Yeah, I would agree. Absolutely. And I would stress that if you can in the interview, you know, is to relay the appropriate time that you've used those different styles. I wouldn't make something up. So don't lie that you led in a certain way that never happened, because usually the story just won't resonate properly. So you might, be interviewing for a role that demands a very strict set of rules, going back to the call center example, right? Where you got to answer with the script. There's a certain things you've got to answer and do it a certain way. But you have not been a leader in that kind of role before. It's okay to admit that, but explain how you may have experienced other types of leadership projects on a tight deadline where you normally would have been a humane leader about it, but you were down to the last 48 hours. Sometimes, coaching and pleading with people and being humane doesn't get the project done in the last most critical hours.
Oh yeah, and one thing is when you get higher in the ladder and you begin applying for director, VPs, chiefs positions, they don't stick in the interviews. They give you some tests to do, and these tests are open answer. So they show you a scenario. Okay, you have this team and it's this number, and you have this manager or this engineer which has this problem of sales. But it does depend on the department. And what they ask you is for you to understand the problem, and regarding of your mindset, give an answer. So when they're asking you about certain specific things about your leadership style, it's really important for you to use the knowledge that you have learned and all these situations that might be similar to that specific scenario, and answer accordingly. So when you are answering about your leadership style, is really important, as you mentioned, not to create, not to lie about it, but try to tell about something that happened to you related to that, and it will bring a balance to that answer and that scenario. Because when a company is trying to hire a higher position, what they want is someone to solve problems, not to create them, but solve problems. If you two nail about this, it will go perfectly.
Yep. When I was interviewing for different roles, I tried to keep in mind three things. My analysis or unique insight to the situation is number one. The actions I would take is number two. Specific actions. Do your best to be very specific about the actions you as the leader are going to take. And third, and most important, sometimes people would gloss over, is what was the actual outcome? Because the outcome is not always positive, or maybe it wasn't always as expected or intended. So if you answer those three things, you're clearly communicating to the person who's interviewing you that you applied a particular management or leadership technique. Maybe it is humane leadership. We always hope that that's the right answer. But when it wasn't, did it work? Did it work better? And maybe depending on how much time you've already taken up answering, and in general, I don't like answers more than just a few minutes long, maybe also indicate what you would do to make it better. But those three things, the analysis, what was your unique insight to that situation? What techniques and things, what actions did you take? And what was that outcome? How did you, as it unfolded and concluded, what was the outcome, positive or negative? Did you analyze that yet again, to self-assess and say what you would do differently? But again, try and keep your answers concise always. I don't want to hear a 30-minute answer to my question when I expected 3 to no more than 5 minutes of answer.
Oh yeah. Usually when I interview someone, regardless of position, I told them specifically, okay, give me in a couple of minutes and I do the question. So don't try to take away, because I have seen people that takes too much time. Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I think and let me tell you let me ask you something. Well, this podcast is about humane leadership, and in this episode, we're talking about situational leadership. But besides humane leadership, what do you think is your second most leadership style that you have?
I think probably very democratic in my reasoning, and here just, and again, it always is going to depend on what job you're in and what's the cultural situation. I came from a company where we had what was called the UOP 25-year club. I'm a member of the club, and the membership was huge because so many people stayed their entire careers at the company. There, people retiring with 50 years of service, kind of thing. I mean, it was amazing. People would start at 18 years old sometimes and stay there till 65. In that kind of culture of the company, democratic, where you're being fair to everyone and trying to gather input, was very critical. And also, it was always very creative type jobs that I had. In other words, very odd problems that we needed to solve, very unique situations to help the business. And so when you need really to get that creativity out of people, and they're really long-term employees, so odds are you're going to, even if they're not working for you, you're going to know them for the rest of your professional career. I personally found being very democratic, gathering input from everybody, and then getting feedback from everybody on whose idea was best and why. For me personally, that's probably my second most favorite choice.
Yes. Well,
And you?
no, let me tell you that when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking that my second leadership style is democratic. So, man, we're alike.
Or what's your third?
And the thing is, in startups, change is so often that you, as the head of the department or the chief, you don't have all the answers because there is too much stuff, too much new technology, too many things to think of. So what I usually tell my team, and when someone I interview, is that rather than having a vertical structure within engineering, I have a horizontal. And that is because it doesn't mean that I have all the answers to all the problems. So what I do is to tell the team, okay, we had this problem. Let's brainstorm from there. And what we have is if someone says, hey, Roberto, we require to implement, I don't know, maybe Mongo, or we require to implement something new, hey, I'm open to that because again, I might be so close to one situation that I haven't opened my eyes and see a different perspective. So what I try to do is a democratic leadership because I know that people, if they feel a willingness to share their ideas, it might be awesome ideas that will fix the problem, maybe immediately, or will solve the problem bluntly. So that's why my second leadership style, it is democratic.
Yeah, and I think that style works very well when you need very creative solutions to problems.
Yeah.
It is probably in my opinion, one of the best ones where you need creative solutions to problems. And again, I came from a company that was all chemical engineers, constantly inventing things. Our business was really about inventions and our patents. And so the whole culture of that was you're there for a long time. You're going to work with these people for the next 40 years, and creativity and your ability to problem solve in unique ways that nobody thought of before was the most rewarded behavior. So in those situations, both humane leadership and democratic work really well because it lets people bring out ideas, lets the team kind of evaluate them fact-based. And that was the other thing that engineering really helped with, right? Is because the arguments were rarely emotional. It was very fact-based. This can do this. This can do so much, in the world of IT, so many transactions per second versus this one would take us 4 times as many CPUs to match it for a compute power, or et cetera, et cetera. So you could have very a fact-based discussions in your problem solving, which I think lends itself to both humane leadership and a democratic style where everybody gets input, everybody gets to express their opinions or their facts, and the team can come to a conclusion that ultimately you're all supportive of whatever the answer is.
Yeah. Great, man. And since we're so close in this, because we have our preferred leadership styles are the same, what do you say to be the opposite? The least leadership style that you use, which will be?
So I'll do a slightly twist to that is like, which do I hate the most and hate being accused of and hate needing to actually use it? And it's certainly micromanagement. I occasionally early in my career was accused of it, and I probably was unintentionally using it at that time because I was concerned about performance, right? I'm new to being a leader. I want everything to go perfectly. I'm following up on every single little detail to make sure that everything's going great. And that was micromanagement that wasn't required. However, sometimes micromanagement is required when a personal performance is poor, and now you've got to set very specific things that they need to do in a specific amount of time. And now you are micromanaging their performance because their performance review is not good. Their performance of what they're doing in their role is not that good. You've tried humane leadership in terms of coaching them and explaining what the outcome is that you need, the level of quality that they need to produce, and they're not doing it. Humane leadership is failing you. So now you got to start to micromanage that person. You've got to follow up. Did you get this done? You were supposed to finish this today. I would prefer to manage things on a bi-weekly or even monthly basis. Here's the something, go get it done. Come back in a month when it's finished. I don't really want to know that at this hour you did this step and then 2 hours later you did that step. Unfortunately, micromanagement usually means that person's not performing well and means you may have to fire them. And I just dread having to apply micromanagement. Hate it. Don't want to have to do it, but sometimes it is the right answer. Even in an interview, it may be the right answer, and maybe it's because of performance problems.
Oh yeah. And I will give you an example that happened to me many years ago. I went to a company and I began knowing the team, and there was this guy who had a lot of potential. And I began applying humane leadership to him, and it didn't work. I began doing democratic, and it didn't work. So what I did was to grab all the humane leadership styles until I reached micromanagement. And this guy performance was skyrocket. He was such an amazing guy, but only if I apply micromanagement to this guy. And as I didn't like micromanage. I don't like it, but if I had to apply it, I will. One thing about micromanagement, it takes a lot of energy. It depletes you. And I don't think it is for everyone. Maybe there has someone who has a lot of stamina and to do it easily, but myself, I wouldn't. But if it's necessary, I will apply it. And I could be like a linebacker smelling on a quarterback's neck as an NFL analogy. I will do it.
Understood. Well, what's another one you don't like besides micromanagement?
Autocratic. I hate it. No, I don't like it. I hate it. But if I had to, I would do it because we know that there is a deadline. We know that we have to crunch and reach a specific numbers. And if we're not reaching, I will apply. I really hate it, but I will I will be the best autocratic leader ever to apply it.
And that's understandable, you know, and again, in an interview, you know, you've got to try and explain, you know, what is the situation that you used it? When you used it, you know, was it effective and what did you learn from it? And, you know, and certainly in my experience of using autocratic styles is it paid off in the short run. So in other words, it was able to, you know, complete the goal. The poor or negative outcome is most of those employees didn't want to work for me anymore. So we may have gotten rewarded for completing the project or getting something done, but the employees don't like being led that way in general. Again, just like your micromanaging example, sometimes people prefer it, but rarely. And, you know, my lesson learned would be, you know, it's a very short-term, you know, solution, and you may lose some good employees along the way that won't want to work for you anymore. But, you know, so it may work very great for a short-term thing, but it's not going to work for a team that's going to be together for 5 years, let's say.
Oh, yeah. Because people see you different. When they see you as maybe as most as humane leadership, and you turn into a micromanagement or autocratic leader, it's like switching from a hero to a villain, you know? So people will be shocked and they might not be comfortable with you anymore until you switch to a human leadership again, maybe.
Yeah, and if you can, as the humane leader, if you get the chance, assuming that they don't all quit on you or move to other companies, et cetera, is, you know, to have a very humane discussion afterwards and explain why this was necessary for you to act so differently and treat them so differently during this situation, and do your best to try and explain the position you are in and why that was required. They may still not forgive you. They may still want to work for somebody else from then on, but you know, you can come back to humane leadership and try and do your best to get them back in your corner, back on your team, kind of thing, back to understanding why these other methods were required during, you know, hopefully a short period of time.
Yeah, indeed. Right, man. Okay, I think with this, we should end this podcast, this episode.
Absolutely. I hope it helps everybody with their interviews. And remember, don't answer too long. 3 to 5 minutes is usually my rule of thumb for max interview answer.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Well, thanks, man.
All right. Take care. See you next week.